And Jesse's point was that sometimes pieces that have been bottled up for a long time, when they finally get out into the game, they sort of have like an extra lust to avenge their oppressed past, so to speak. And so they're angry and they want to come out and take revenge. And so this knight on b8 is really, as we're going to see, going to be an angry knight in this game. Okay, now another thing I want to mention here, Mark said in his comments he thought that that Black would have to play bishop takes knight here because he has to defend against the threats of knight c7 and knight to d6. In my opinion, that's not true. In my opinion, those threats are not so bad. But even if Black does play this move, it's kind of interesting. So in this situation, it looks as if White's bishop is dominating Black's knight. But then Black can just play a6. And if the bishop leaves, then the knight comes out as easy as pie with knight to d7. And Black's doing fine. Okay. Alternatively, if White plays queen to a4, trying to pin the a-pawn, then Black has a really funny little rearrangement here. He can play rook to a7, and let's say White plays rook to d1, trying to keep the knight from getting out to d7. Then Black just goes queen to e7, defending the rook. And it's a very funny thing, the way his pieces are out, and Black's pieces are coordinating very well, even though they're all sort of back on the last two ranks. And now, White is going to have to retreat his bishop, okay? And then Black is able to bring his knight out and solve all of his problems. Or another interesting possibility, suppose White tries to anticipate this by playing bishop to d3. And the idea here is that after knight to d7, White can go queen to e4 and start threatening very serious threat of checkmate on h7. But even this isn't such a big deal. Black just plays g6, and White can't really do anything. Black is threatening knight to c5, which forks the queen and bishop. And if the queen goes to c6, which looks like a real sensitive square, well, Black can just kind of defend the b-pawn, and then all of a sudden the knight is threatening to go to e5. So that knight just has so many great squares available to it, and White just has trouble really achieving anything. So a very deceptive sort of position where it looks like White should be better, but it just isn't true because Black's knight has so many great squares. Black's bishop on d7, even though it's not doing much, it's out and it's sort of controlling, White's knight. It's dominating White's knight. So very interesting position. Okay, well, let's continue now. Let's see what happened next. So after b6, White plays rook to d1. Black plays rook to d8. Knight c6 was also possible. Bishop to e2. White's trying to come around and put pressure on this long diagonal, but it's really not a big deal. Now Black plays knight to c6. And White plays bishop to f3, which is consistent with his plan, but it turns out that this move is also a little bit of a mistake. The problem is that White is forcing Black to play the move he wants to play anyway, which is rook to c8. And after this move, the bishop on f3 really isn't doing anything, and in fact the bishop would rather be back on e2 because White needs to control the square c4. But now White has basically allowed Black complete control of the blockading square on c4, and that will give Black just a very, very good game. So at this point, Black is already probably better, and White should probably think about just trying to cut his losses. Take that knight off the board and just try to hang on. But even so, in this position, I think that Black has a definite advantage because now really the only important positional factor is the isolated pawn on c3, and Black is going to be able to start loading up and putting pressure on that. So if bishop takes bishop, rook takes bishop, double on the c file, and Black has a great game. It's just going to be very long, arduous task for white to defend that position. But still, I think that may have been better for white than what he did. So what happened was rook to c1, totally passive move. You never want to have to make a move like this because it makes no threats. All it does is defend the c3 pawn. And now the initiative just completely switches over to black. Knight to a5, queen to b4, rook to c4. Black's pieces, not just the angry knight, but all of black's pieces are in a really surly mood. They're all coming out, and just suddenly they're just taking over the board. 3, 4, 5 moves ago, black's pieces were all back on the back two ranks, but now they're just running rampant. It's really amazing. Okay, and now white again plays a slight mistake. Just a lot of little errors for white end up adding to a lost game. So I think really white's last chance here to stay in the game was to play knight to b3. And Mark mentions this in his own analysis. He says that then he would have played rook takes rook, and if rook takes rook, then he wins a pawn with bishop takes knight, pawn takes bishop, and rook takes pawn. But unfortunately, he doesn't mention what he would have done if white goes bishop takes rook. And this is, in fact, the better move for white. And this is also kind of an ironic move, because now it looks as if, all of a sudden white's pieces are kind of getting forced back and they're getting kind of cramped. But they're sort of starting to turn a little bit angry too. And black has to be careful in this position, because white is starting to go knight takes knight, which will double black's pawns, give black, basically nullify the black's advantage of the isolated c-pawn. And if black retreats his knight, say if he goes to c6, then all of a sudden his rook has no flight squares. And white can go bishop to e2. And where's the rook going to go? It's really embarrassed. Or if the knight goes back to b7, then white can play knight to d2. Actually could have done that in the other line too. And again, black is embarrassed because his rook's under attack, and if he moves his rook, then the bishop is going to die. So if he tries, where can the rook go? It's only squares here, and then white will just play g3, and black either loses the rook or he loses the bishop. So black has got to watch out for these angry pieces. Probably black's best move here would be queen to e5, and still black has some advantage, but now white could play knight to d4, and as I said, white's in the game. One thing to realize is that the white is really eager to trade pieces because white has a cramped position, and so trading off is good for him at this point. So white was able to get off a pair of rooks, and if the bishops come off too, bishop takes bishop, rook takes bishop, then white's okay. Not great, but white has some hope to be able to defend. So instead, white played rook to d2, which again is a do-nothing move. It's just defending, but not threatening anything, not really doing much. And actually the rook now is in kind of an awkward position, because if black could get a knight to c4, then white's queen and rook would be forked. Okay, so Mark plays rook c8 first, which is a good move, doubling up on the c-pawn. And now white plays bishop e2, so white's finally realizing his bishop is misplaced. Mark plays rook to c5. He points out that he didn't actually have to move his rook, because if bishop takes rook, knight takes bishop, and black will win the material back. However, a key point to realize about the position is black's knight really wants to be on c4. He wants his knight there, not his rook. And so actually black wants to play rook c5. So in some sense, white keeps forcing black to play moves that he wants to do anyway. Now white played queen b4, trying to get some activity, but black just plays knight c4, jumping into the square. And notice that, of course, if white goes queen takes bishop, then black would win the exchange. So the only way to stop that, okay, is bishop takes knight, and now rook takes bishop, and the rook is now back to defending a4, and the queen retreats to a3. So look at this position. It's a beautiful position for black. The rooks are doubled on the c-file. The bishop is sort of creating havoc in black's position, controlling the square c2 and d1. The queen is nicely placed. So everything here is just looking great for black. Okay, now Mark played b5. And this was an interesting decision. The reason for this is that Mark wants to defend his bishop on a4 so that he can maybe actually, if he ever wants to actually take the pawn on c3, he couldn't do it before because he'd hang the bishop. But now the threats on c3 become really serious. And black has the idea perhaps of bringing his queen to the c-file and tripling up on that c-file. Now, I would really think hard before playing a move like b5, because it does have a downside, which is that the bishop on a4 now has no moves. And so there's always a danger that that bishop will just get turned into a bystander. However, I think that Mark's decision was correct. And he comments that he was actually thinking that of playing b4, thinking that eventually he's going to get the opportunity to play b4. And so I think it's really good that he was thinking dynamically, not just thinking in terms of protecting his bishop, but also already thinking in terms of playing this pawn lever on b4, which would really crash through white's defenses. Of course, he can't play that right away, but he's thinking about it for the future. However, his opponent unexpectedly makes a mistake, which is knight to d2. And now black does get to play b4 right away. So b4, exclamation point. Very nice move. Okay, and of course one point is if queen takes bishop, then pawn takes pawn. And both the queen and the rook are hanging. So black wins material. And another point is if queen to b2, then pawn takes pawn. Obviously forks the queen in the rook. And Mark notes in his comments that if knight takes pawn, rook takes knight, rook takes rook, queen takes rook, it almost looks like white can set up a fork and ladder trick. For those of you who haven't heard of that, go back to my lecture on the fork and ladder trick from a couple years ago, where if rook takes rook, white would win the queen. However, black would get the last laugh here with the checkmate. So the fork and ladder trick doesn't quite work. Or black could even just play king h7 and be perfectly safe as well. Okay, so instead white plays pawn takes pawn, and it may be that white still thought he was doing okay because the rook on c1 appears to be well enough guarded. However, black is able to win by force, and if you want, you could hit the pause button and see if you see the combination. It's really not all that hard, but it's very pretty. He goes rook takes rook check, knight takes rook, and now the winning move is queen to a1. And I just think this is a lovely finish to the game because that queen was sitting there on f6 for so long, sort of putting pressure on that diagonal, putting pressure on d4 and on c3, and now it finally breaks through all the way to a1. And then the other thing that's beautiful about this is the way that bishop on a4 contributes to the winning combination because white's rook is unable to come back to d1 and defend because of the bishop there. And also white never gets the time to play queen takes bishop because, of course, if he plays queen takes bishop, then he's going to be checkmated after rook takes knight. So I think that's a really beautiful thematic finishing combination. And so let's kind of take stock and ask, why did things go so well for black in this game? Well, what happened is if you look at this position, white has done exactly the opposite of what you want when you have an isolated pawn. White has allowed all of his pieces to become tied down to defending that c-pawn. And so even if white had not made that mistake with knight to e2, I think that his best move would have been rook to b2 to prevent b4. But even so, white is just like, his pieces can't do anything in this position. So, black can just simply play a6, defending the b pawn, and white is unable to do anything. If he plays rook to b4, the rook just comes back, and now a5 is threatened. And meanwhile, also, black is threatening things like queen to g6, followed by queen to d3, and just sort of worming his way into white's position. So basically, white is defenseless, whereas black can really just squeeze him for forever. And so, at best, white would be able to draw this after a very long, agonizing defense. But this is a sort of position where 9 out of 10 times, if you get stuck with this extremely passive situation where you're just defending the isolated pawn, you're going to lose. Because either what's going to happen is that black's going to create a target somewhere else on the board and sort of play the two targets approach to winning the game, or else, as we saw in the game, black is going to be able to break through on one of the adjacent files. So he's going to be able to play this pawn lever of b4. And now the pin along the c file turns out to be the key sort of strategic ingredient. So very instructive, very thematic way for black to win the game. And now, I didn't tell you what the players' ratings were, because, as far as I'm concerned, black played this game like a master. His actual rating is 1510, or 1518 to be precise. So I was really blown away to see a game where a 1500 player plays so beautifully and so thematically, and then has his positional goods play rewarded by such a pretty combination at the end. So congratulations, Mark. Very well done game, and I hope you enjoy your free month of membership in ChessLecture. And for the rest of you, please send in your games, and you can also get a free month. So for ChessLecture.com, this is Dana Mackenzie signing out.
This is Grandmaster Damian Lemos here for OnlineChessLessons.net. First of all, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you would like to receive more free chess videos from us, you can just click the subscribe button below. I would also highly recommend signing up for my free mail course, the 10 Grandmaster Secrets to Dominate Chess. During this exclusive course from OnlineChessLessons.net, I'll share with you my own Grandmaster shortcuts to effective attacking, defending, and growth hacks to improving your chess without complicated books or memorization. So sign up by clicking the sidebar on the right, and I know you won't be disappointed. Once more, this is Damian for OnlineChessLessons.net, and I'll see you in my videos. Thank you.